How great leaders and pilots create momentum. Welcome to the Beau Leadership Group podcast. I'm your host, Bob Beaulaurier of Beau Leadership Group. And today we are talking about being the pilot in command in your life so you can achieve your goals with school, your family, or your business goals. Or perhaps if you're like me and you're part of the 1% of the world who are licensed pilots, imagine you had to land a plane and the weather was bad and the pilot was unconscious. What would you do? On a modern plane, you might be noticing a button that says land safe, which could actually use the radio and all of the avionics to safely land the plane. Because a good pilot, like a good leader, communicates, listens, uses teamwork, and lands their goals. Guess what? Physics majors and pilots are often successful in life. My mom was a physics major and she's very smart about cause and effect. And she has been a great person to champion causes and getting people to support her goals and creating momentum, like building a domestic violence shelter. She's afraid of heights and would never be a pilot, but she has flown with me in my plane and she has flown with other pilots more skilled than me, including a fighter pilot, because she has faith and trusts the laws of physics. This is the podcast where we explore leadership, planning, and how to land our goals safely and get a return on that investment in our leadership. We're going to talk about fundamental concepts that pilots live by, the laws of physics, and how to play those things into our success. So stick around because you're about to learn how momentum can take you places you never thought possible. So let me ask you a question. When you're in a cockpit of an airplane, maybe you're not, but you could be in the cockpit of a ship and be a pilot, or in the cockpit of a wagon train. Pilot Rock was a turning point where the Oregon Trail took a turn, and you might have been just piloting an ox or two. But think about your goals and getting your goals. Don't be afraid of the laws. There are laws of flight that are going to not subtly change. Question: when you're in the cockpit of an airplane, do you think the pilot is afraid of the laws of flight and they're going to suddenly change and the airplane is just going to fall out of the sky? Of course not. They trust the science behind it. They trust Newton's laws of motion, Bernoulli's principles, and a whole host of other physics that govern flight. They understand these laws, apply them, and plan them in their flights accordingly. It's not a random event that a pilot lands a plane. It's deliberate, intentional, and based on science. Today, I want to talk about how you can build and use the laws of physics to build momentum, land your goals, and bring others with you on that journey to success. So, I've mentioned some of the things that are important, like flow and mow. Now, let's dive into the first part of our discussion: planning and preparation. When you're a pilot in command, or PIC as we say, you're responsible for the safety of the aircraft, the crew, and the passengers. You wouldn't think about flying without creating a flight plan, one that includes everything from weather forecasts to our alternative airports in case you encounter unexpected obstacles. Remember from previous episodes, we talked about goals, obstacles, and how to overcome those obstacles and putting something in your planner. We're in the planning phase now. And for instance, before a flight, a pilot files what's called an instrument approach plan. This includes information like weather, runway length, and wind direction because all these factors can affect your landing. And here's where the magic happens. The PIC uses these resources to plan the safest, most effective approach to the runway. Here's the kicker: they don't do it alone. They have a whole team that contributes to this process. And no, I'm not just talking about co-pilots. I'm talking about flight attendants, passengers, ground control, ground crews, people who fuel the plane, the mechanics who make everything work. Little things we take for granted, like the aircraft's checklist. Each airplane has its own individual checklist that helps to keep the plane flying safely. I want you to imagine this for a second. You're coming in for a landing, the weather's rough, and you've got the whole plane full of passengers looking to you for guidance. What do? The PIC would call on all available resources. They'd communicate with the crew, ensuring everything is in order. They'd talk to the passengers, keeping them informed. Because when everybody's on the same page, there's less anxiety and more trust. And that leads to a smoother landing. I remember an example of my own flying experience that there was a situation where we had to circle for an extended period around some fire and smoke. The smoke was climbing above 24,000 feet, higher than I wanted to fly that day. And so we couldn't climb over it. And we were near the busy Seattle airspace. Instead of focusing on the technical aspects, I addressed my passengers' concern directly, reassuring them that we were following a solid plan and we had enough fuel to reverse course if we needed to. This made a world of difference. I was able to keep the energy calm and positive. I will say, though, I learned on that flight that it probably would have been better to reverse course because even though I was able to land safely and nothing out of my control was really a problem, I broke the rule number one in being a pilot, and that is when you're pilot in command, you shouldn't scare the passengers. This could be hard for those of us who are aggressive like me and entrepreneurial because we are less afraid of risk than others who may be more safety conscious, looking for a lot more assurance. Be aware of those personalities. Now, back to the question, do you have an alternate plan? I'm not just talking about aviation. In life, things don't always go as you plan, right? The weather changes, your runway length might be different, and you might face technical difficulties just like a pilot. That is why every pilot is required to file an alternate airport. It's just another layer of preparation. When was the last time that you thought about an alternate plan for your life and your life goals? Are you prepared for things when they don't go as expected? How else can you make progress? My father used to say it was important to have 2 to 3 balls in the air, meaning multiple goals, because one of his ideas would not be great, but with 3 ideas, one of them might be great. In his case, he was looking to achieve financial goals through fundraising. I've learned that goals can look very different from when we set them, especially when we hit those unexpected bumps in the road. But here's the thing, just like in aviation, when the weather changes, it doesn't mean the flight is over. It just means adjust, adapt, and keep moving forward. Speaking of momentum, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about flow. I love the concept of momentum and flow. In athletics, you might think of Michael Jordan in flow with his game dominating performances. I used to think that others were in a flow state, just like Michael, when they'd stick out their tongue, like they're in the zone, right? And as a pilot and in leadership, I think it's important that you understand that velocity isn't just speed, it's speed plus direction. And when you combine velocity with direction, you're on your way to momentum. But here's something I bet you didn't think about. Flow isn't just for pilots. Think of athletes like quarterbacks, like Drew Bledsoe. Drew Bledsoe's from my hometown. My mom got me one of his footballs that he autographed, and I used to keep that football in this room where I am right now, but I actually gave it to an auction so it could be auctioned off again for a good cause. Drew's dad was a football coach in town, and there were occasions when he was the best quarterback, but he didn't get to play because of the coach's decision. But Drew was a true teammate who could keep the flow going and was always prepared to step in and had some very notable wins. When Tom Brady suffered a leg injury in the AFC Championship in 2001, Drew took over and had a fantastic game, and they didn't beat a slouch team either. They beat the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers. Drew took the Patriots through a championship game that set the stage for Tom Brady to win his Super Bowl. Drew had to adjust his dream of quarterbacking in the Super Bowl, no doubt. He's an amazing athlete, but he also has been tremendously generous in the community. He may be bigger than many will ever be because he created tracks and gyms and things for kids to develop in his hometown. That's pretty priceless. And anyway, that's true in leadership too, right? When you do things for others. But back to the momentum idea. Think about Tom Brady in 2017 and the Patriots facing an almost insurmountable deficit in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons. But what happened next? Brady led the Patriots on an unbelievable comeback, and they ended up winning the game. But how did this happen? It was the flow of the entire team creating that momentum together. Brady was seen running up and down the sidelines, pumping up his teammates, motivating them, and keeping them in the game and focused. His leadership created that momentum. And when they started clicking, that momentum was contagious. Fans in the stadium who were ready to leave because it looked like a blowout started believing again. Patriots fans at home were re-energized and they hosted parties and momentum spread. The next thing, they're celebrating in Boston with a Super Bowl parade. When you go from flow to mo, it's contagious. Momentum can take a team, a business, or even a group of passengers to heights they never thought possible. I heard a CEO say that creating momentum is his main job because there are a million great ideas, but without momentum, they won't happen. But you've got to create that flow first, just like a pilot prepares for their flight by checking the weather, alternative airports, and runway conditions. You've got to make clear the direction and an action plan. But don't forget, momentum is contagious. So, momentum can go the wrong way. We talk about this in culture, right? It only takes one person to create a great culture. That's the good news. The bad news is that it only takes one person to create bad momentum or a bad culture. When others see you leading with confidence and purpose, they'll join in and the energy becomes exponential. Let me ask you, when was the last time you found yourself in a moment where you needed momentum to keep pushing it toward that goal? How did you handle it? Did you have a backup plan like a pilot with an alternate airport, or did you just hope for the best? Now, before we wrap up, let's talk about Newton's laws for a second. You probably heard of them: inertia, acceleration, and action reaction. These laws of motion aren't just for physics class, they're for you and your team and your leadership. In fact, these laws are so powerful that they can help you build momentum in your personal and professional life. Talk to your team about velocity, acceleration, and how to keep the momentum going. People like to talk about winning. Don't make it too much about winning, but make it somewhat about winning, because winning is another way of saying achieving your goals. These can be positive goals in your community, like Drew Bledsoe, or winning championships, like Tom Brady. How do you keep the momentum going, especially when things get rough? When you do, you are building resilience in advance when you tell people how to make a Brady-like comeback. Some people do not believe that you can create momentum. I've run into this many times, but remind them of sports. Remind them that the laws of physics exist and airplanes don't fall out of the sky, because there are laws to these things that reasonable and wise people have helped us to understand. It's cause and effect, and it's also the causes and the big dreams that are visions worth running for. Dream big. Until next time, keep your checklist in order and always have an alternative plan. And remember that your momentum, your mo, is your friend. Go with the flow and the mo, whether you're flying, leading a team, or chasing their goals. Momentum with a team will take you further than you ever could grinding alone. And remember, leadership is about others. A good pilot doesn't leave anything to chance. He or she lands their goals with precision and confidence. I'm Bob Beaulaurier of Beau Leadership Group. Bless your week.